Good morning, everybody. I want to thank Diane for that lovely interpretation. She has a clear gift and talent for the words of poetry, which I fully appreciate. Today we're going to continue our talk about the 7 habits, and today's habit number 2, called the Principles of Personal Leadership. And we're going to start off with a little quote from Oliver Wendell Holmes, which states, "What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us." And Diana mentioned in the beginning of her poem several questions. I'll paraphrase. Where are we from? Where are we now? And where are we going? And today's sermon really addresses the third question, where are we going? And basically we begin then with the end in mind to answer the question, where are we going? Each day of our life contributes in a very real and meaningful way to the vision you have in your life as a whole. By having a clear picture of the whole, or what you envision as the ideal you can then form your daily behavior to mold yourself into your ideal. You can take proactive steps, habit number 1, which we discussed last month, to make certain that whatever you do on any given day does not violate the criteria you have defined as supremely important to your life. This is beginning with the end in mind. This is habit number 2. Using a computer analogy, which those who know me I'm particularly fond of, habit 1 tells us that we are our own computer programmer. Habit 2 then tells us, write the program. So to begin with the end in mind means knowing where your final destination lies. It means knowing where you're going so that you better understand where you are now and what steps you can take to always keep you going in the right direction. It is amazing how different our lives are when we really know what is deeply important to us, and keeping that picture in mind, we manage ourselves each and every day to do what really matters most. Mr. Covey states that we may be very, very busy, we actually may be very efficient, but we will also be truly effective only when we begin with the end in mind. All things are created twice, either by design or by default. And taking a more artistic approach to the analogy, habit number 1 tells us we are the creator, and habit number 2 tells us this is our first creation. Now, the great work has always taught the concept of visualization and the fact that all things are first created in our mind's eye and then brought into reality or manifestation. Such simple examples include interior designing, landscaping and gardening, which a lot of us are doing right now, carpentry, and building a house. All of these creations first seen with the mind's eye and then are physically brought into reality. This is creation, and we do it every day. It's a fundamental principle that all things are created twice, but not all first creations are by conscious design. Let me repeat that. It is understood that it's a fundamental principle that all things are created twice, but not all first creations are by conscious design. If we do not develop our own self-awareness and become responsible for our first creations in our own mind's eye, we then allow and empower other people and circumstances to shape our lives by default. In other words, we are either the second creation of our own proactive design, or we are the second creation of other people's agendas, of circumstances, or of past dysfunctional habits. This leads us into the next step in our discussion, the difference between leadership and management, 2 creations. Each and every one of us are leaders. We are our own personal leaders. We are the CEO and the middle managers of our own life. Mr. Covey's habit 2 tells us that personal leadership is our first creation and personal management is our second creation. He stresses leadership must come before management because in today's society we are all caught up in management with very little leadership in our lives. Leadership deals with the top line. What are the things I want to accomplish? What do I want to do? Where am I going? Management deals with the bottom line. How can I best accomplish certain things? Leadership is doing the right things. Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing right things. Management is doing things right. Personal leadership thus requires we pick the right things we want to accomplish before we plunge into doing things right. Now, none of this is new. The Nazarene talked about this, and in Matthew 7, verses 24 to 27 told us, "Therefore, whosoever heareth these things of mine and doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man, which built his house upon a rock. And the rains descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And every one that heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them not, shall be likened unto a foolish man, which built his house upon the sand. And the rains descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it." Now, in this passage, both the wise man and the fool had management, doing right things, build each of their house. And I'm sure both were beautiful, both were strong and lovely houses. But the wise man had the leadership to build his house upon a sound and firm foundation of rock, doing right things. The Nazarene here is telling us to build our life's house upon a rock, to make the personal leadership first creation of doing the right thing by designing our lives in harmony with the principles of divine law. Personal management then comes in to build our life's house by doing those things in our life right and well. Personal leadership always comes first. Management, important, always comes second. This is easier said than done because we often become caught up in the management paradigm in our lives, the accumulation of things and the accomplishment of worldly attainments before we have clarified our values and our life purpose. So the first step in accomplishing this task of personal leadership is to rescript, to become our own first creator. And in developing our spiritual house, our own self-awareness and consciousness, many of us discover dysfunctional, ineffective behaviors that are deeply embedded habits that are totally unworthy of us, totally incongruent with the things that we really value in our life. The great work tells us that we don't have to live with those scripts. We can proactively, responsibly use our own powers of visualization and creativity to rescript these old dysfunctional behaviors and habits and write new ones that are more effective and more congruent with our deeper values and with the principles that give our life meaning. This leads us specifically to a personal mission statement for our own individual lives. Again, each of us is a CEO and middle manager of our lives. Our first leadership action is the process of writing the new scripts for our life. Mr. Covey calls this script a personal mission statement for our life. Our own personal mission statement embodies personal leadership. It gives us a guide of what are the right things to do. Our personal mission statement is just like a personal constitution. It's like the United States Constitution. It is fundamentally changeless. The United States Constitution has endured and still serves its vital functions because it's based on correct principles, on the self-evident truths contained in the Declaration of Independence. It was actually Benjamin Franklin who gave us the modern personal mission statement. He did it with his life, and he told us how to do it in ours. Personal mission statement based on correct principles becomes the same kind of standard for individuals. It becomes a personal constitution, the basis for making major, life-directing decisions, along with the basis for making daily decisions in the midst of circumstances and emotions that affect our lives. Our personal mission statement empowers us with the same timeless strength in the midst of change. Life is constantly changing. By definition, life is change. People can't live with change if they don't have a changeless core inside of them. People can't live with change if they don't have a changeless core inside of them. The key to the ability to change and be flexible in the midst of life's storms is to live by a changeless principle in your personal mission statement. Now, how do we know what is the right thing? What are these self-evident truths discussed in the Declaration of Independence? We find these truths in the teachings of the past masters, and they actually lie in our own hearts. We can access them, we know them. Actually, Dr. Clymer wrote the mission and the governing values of the great work right in the responsive reading that we read at every service. Throughout the ages, the arcane schools have taught and promulgated the divine principles governing life. Today, we call these principles the divine laws of God. Our purpose on earth is clearly stated, but seldom understood, in the command of the Nazarene. Render unto Caesar the things that belong to Caesar, and to God that which belongs to God. And, for what shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul? We can see in these two statements of the Nazarene that spiritual attainment of individualized soul consciousness is our number one mission in life. And number two, success in the material affairs of life that better oneself and humanity at large. There is our mission statement. That is where we are going. Dr. Clymer said it a little differently. Spiritual individualization is our supreme work. The individual who has attained to the status of recognizing the divine law and who has a willingness to obey it without interfering with others is greater than church or state, though subject to its laws of the land. Such an individual is free, is a co-worker with God, because such an individual does the will of God. Such an individual has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of well-being for himself and that of those depending upon him, provided always that he does not interfere with the rights of others. We can look at some governing values that shape and guide our mission, enable us to fulfill our personal mission statement. I listed some of them, but by all means this is not all-inclusive. To love my neighbor and do unto others as I would have them do unto me. To be a servant of God and a server of humanity. To accept responsibility for the consequences of every single one of my thoughts, words, and deeds. And let the law of justice bring me that which is my due. To give thought to only that which will benefit both myself and my fellow human beings. By the sweat of my brow shall I live, and I will reap only that which I sow. To create the greatest good for the greatest number of people. To be gracious in all activities of daily living. To fear one thing only, disobeying the divine laws of God. To lead my life by example, not by interfering with the life of others, but to help those who seek my service. To judge the behavior of others, but not hold it against them for their behavior, as this is to be also merciful. To not bear false witness, in other words, to keep my vows, obligations, and agreements. Our personal mission statement and governing values based on the divine laws of God is our rock to build our spiritual and earthly house. As we begin each day with these values firmly in mind, the vicissitudes and challenges of life can be managed by these values. We can act with integrity and not have to react to the emotions and circumstances involved. As a principle-centered person, we can stand apart from the emotion of the situation and from other factors that would act on us, and objectively evaluate our options to arrive at the best possible solution at the time. We thus can be truly proactive, value-driven, because our values are clear. I would like to, before we end, read an example that I thought brings this down a little bit into our daily life. This is an example Mr. Covey gives us. Suppose tonight you've invited your wife or a loved one to go to a concert. You have the tickets. She's excited about going. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. All of a sudden, your boss calls you into his office and says he needs your help through the evening to get ready for a very important meeting at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. Now, there's many ways we can look at the situation, and he goes through all ways that are not principle or value-driven. First, if you're looking through a spouse-centered or family-centered glass, your main concern will be your wife. You may tell the boss that you can't stay and you take her to the concert in an effort to please her. You may feel you have to stay to protect your job, but you'll do so grudgingly, anxious about her response, trying to justify your decision and protect yourself from her disappointment or anger. If you're looking through a money-centered lens, your main thought will be of the overtime you'll get or the influence working late you will have on a potential raise. You may call your wife and simply tell her you have to stay, assuming she'll understand and the economic demands have to come first. If you're work-centered, you may be thinking of the opportunity. You can learn more about the job. You can make some points with the boss and further your career. You may give yourself a pat on the back for putting in hours well beyond what is required, evident of what a hard worker you are. Your wife will be proud of you. If you're possession-centered, you might be thinking of all the things the overtime income could buy. You might consider what an asset to your reputation at the office it would be if you stayed. Everyone would hear tomorrow how noble, how sacrificing, and how dedicated you are. If you're pleasure-centered, you'll probably can the work and go to the concert, even if your wife would be happy for you to work late. You deserve a night out. If you're friend-centered, your decision would be influenced by whether or not you had invited friends to attend the concert with you, or whether your friends at work were going to stay late too. If you're enemy-centered, you may stay late because you know it will give a big edge over that person in the office who thinks he's the company's greatest asset. While he's off having fun, you'll be working and slaving, doing his work and yours, sacrificing your personal pleasure for the good of the company that he so blithely ignored. If you're church-centered, you might be influenced by plans other church members have to attend the concert, by whether or not any church members work at your office, or by the nature of the concert. Handel's Messiah might rate higher priority than a rock concert. Your decision might also be so affected by what you think a good church member would do, and by whether you view the work as a service or seeking after material wealth. If you're self-centered, you'll be focused on what will do you the most good. Would it be better for you to get out for the evening, or would it be better for you to make a few points with the boss? How the different options affect you will be the main concern. Now, a principle-centered person would take that situation, apply the governing principles in their life, which we just discussed, and make a decision based on the principles governing their life. There's no right or wrong answer to that decision. The point being, the decision will be based on their principles. They will evaluate the situation objectively, ignore the emotions and the circumstances involved, and try to create and choose the greatest good for the greatest number. Reverend Emerson had an analogy that I think sums all this up. He was very fond of saying that our end mission, where are we going, soul consciousness, individualized spiritualization, to him was like traveling on a trip. He used it from East Coast to West Coast. He said some people hop right on a Lear jet from New York and fly right to California as fast as they can. Other people take a train. Other people take a bus. Other people hitchhike. Other people walk. And everyone does it in a different fashion. But they're all going in the same direction. They are all led by a principle-centered life, although they do it differently. All right, the joke is short. Free medical advice. A doctor and a lawyer were talking at a party. Their conversation was constantly interrupted by people describing their ailments and asking the doctor for free medical advice. After an hour of this, the exasperated doctor asked the lawyer, "What do you do to stop people from asking you for legal advice when you're out of the office?" "I give it to them," replied the lawyer, "and then I send them a bill." The doctor was shocked, but agreed to give it a try. Nothing else has worked so far. The next day, still feeling slightly guilty, the doctor prepared the bills. When he went to place them in the mailbox, he found a bill from the lawyer. If you all rise for the benediction, please. May the divine consciousness shine upon us and overshadow us as we leave the portals of this temple today. May the divine light within us shine ever so much brighter, becoming indeed and in truth a lamp unto our feet and a beacon in the darkness for all those who are groping for the light. Amen, amen, amen. Peace be with you.